So let's start. This is Build Your Strength. I'm Michael Prediger. My guest today is Mikael D Luman. To describe Michael is not easy. Please excuse, it's going to become a longer monologue to give you a better view onto his journey. He's a sportsman who was active in soccer, basketball, and track with distances of 800 and 1500 meter. Several injuries stopped his sports career, and his dreams disappeared into thin air. All this overwhelmed him so much that he began to drink. Step by step, he lost control, and what started with alcohol became drugs. It were also the drugs that put him in prison for almost 2 years. And shortly before Christmas 2000, he was released again, and he got clean and has been it since that time. About 6 years later, he summarized all his experiences in an autobiography in a book which is named 800 Meters. He founded a non-profit organization and made a world record attempt for the Guinness Book of Records. His goal: to cross the US from north to south, from east to west, with more than 12,000 miles on just a bicycle, faster than anyone before him faster than anyone before did this. And the aim was really to get attention for his book and to do good with that. And at this point, I don't want to reveal the facts and the result yet. Only so much. Chance had his hand on the game again. He spent a lot of time motivating young people to pursue their dreams and so pursue their goals and live their dreams, and mainly keep away from drugs. His health problems caught up with him again, and after several surgeries, Michael was in a situation in 2015 where he needed more hip and back surgeries, and he said he had no options anymore at all. At that time, when he had no hope or faith left, the miraculous happened. Michael found an incredible way to heal himself. This experience shaped him so much that he looked into the background of healing, quantum field, and mind-body connection, and he learned how to heal and started healing other people as well. Probably Michael is going to correct this statement immediately, explaining he could not heal anybody. He just points the way and opens the door. Everybody has to go through for himself. Since then, Michael has healed more than 100 people. Currently, he's about to start his own podcast and starting a concept for Train the Trainer to help others to heal and to do good. Michael, a warm welcome to you to Build Your Strength. I'm absolutely pleased talking to you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
So sorry, there was an extreme long introduction, but you had so many turning points and so many situations in your life I could read about or found videos about that I had to do to give everybody really an impression who I'm talking to right now. And recently you've been guest in various podcasts as well. So how has been the experience with that?
With being on the other podcasts?
Yeah.
It's been good. I think that every time I have the chance to share my experience, it starts to make a little bit more sense, and that I'm able to get a little bit more defined on what it is that I do, but also what it is that what I want to do moving forward. So it's a good experience to be able to say things, out loud.
That's great. In the preparation for our conversation, so it all reminded me to my own past. So ages ago, I was active in athletics, soccer, and military version of motorbike rally. So it was a kind of time travel for me, diving deeper in your biography. And so in which position? So soccer is not really the standard sports in the US. So on which position did you play and how did you get to it?
In soccer, I played right midfield my sophomore year in high school, and then my junior year and senior year, I was more of a center mid, center forward position.
Okay, so would have been playing behind you. So I was on the right defense side.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So yes, it's interesting. So have you been active in all the three sports simultaneously, or has it been one after the next?
I mean, growing up, I pretty much played every sport. When I got to high school, it was a little bit separate, soccer and then basketball and then track, and then I played summer baseball, and I mean, even in the wintertime, I snow skiing and stuff like that. So I mean, I was always active doing something.
Which of the sports did you enjoy most?
I would say that I probably enjoyed soccer the most, and even probably baseball and basketball. I mean, I enjoyed track, and I probably had an opportunity to be the best in track, and that's why I stopped playing in baseball and started running track in high school. But the pressure of having to perform in track was what kind of led to my years of addiction. So if you're playing a team sport, you can hide behind the team, and all the pressure isn't on one person. Whereas in track and field, it's pretty much you. And so up until the point that I got injured, I was always more concerned about finishing first than I was about doing my best. And I think up until that point, it was fairly easy to always finish first because I was fortunate or unfortunate, however you want to look at it, to be more talented than others. But after I injured myself in basketball my junior year in high school, and then coming out for track that year, all the expectations of continuing to be the best, but yet coming off of a broken kneecap where I had to have surgery and screws inserted into the knee, it was a little bit more than I could handle mentally. And from that point forward, I was never able to run a faster time in the 800. I mean, I ran a 157 as a sophomore, and I think I ran a 158 the first meet, and that was the closest I ever got the next 2 years. Now, I could run the 400. I ran a 53 my sophomore year, and then my senior year, I ended up running a 48.5. So I could run fast. Physically, I was all right. But mentally, if I had to put 2 laps together and I had to think and plan and pace, I was more concerned about losing than I ever was about just going out and win. And it was an issue.
Yeah, I know the situation with the pressure, but I never did it professionally, and so it was not talented enough. Most fun was street soccer, with the kids really on the street, and later on the military rally version with motorbikes. And so you touched the point that it led already, the injuries led already to taking alcohol and so on. So what happened? You tried to recover, and obviously with the obstacle of the knee, it's impossible to have a perfect run.
Well, and I would say that the injuries didn't necessarily lead to the drinking, but the injuries definitely made drinking a more pleasurable option. So up until the point of the first injury, it was fairly easy for me to say no when my friends were doing it. And after the injury, thinking that I was at a point of my life being over, not thinking that I was going to be able to compete in sports again, I, at that point, made a choice when my friends asked me to drink to say yes. Whereas up until that point, I'd always been able to say no. And in that moment of weakness, you know, saying yes and starting to drink, it actually did something for me, right? For that, you know, 4 hours or 5 hours or whatever that time period was, I didn't have to worry about being the best or, you know, what people might think or how long it was going to take to recover or whatever it was, right? In that experience, I was free from all of that pressure. Now, it all came back, and I had the opportunity to either continue and say yes the next time or not. But when the next weekend came around, at that point, it was easier just to say yes and drink again than it was to say no. And always thinking that, well, I'm just going to do this until my knee heals, until I start, you know, running again or being able to play basketball again. But once you start, I mean, it's the stopping part that becomes difficult, not just because of the addiction part of it, but also because if I've said no up until a certain point, and then I decide that I'm going to say yes, to say no the next time becomes that more difficult, because then you have to explain, or this is your thinking, that you have to explain, well, why did I say yes for the last month, right? If it was that important to me, then I wouldn't have, you know, been doing it for that month. So it was easier just to continue than it was to stop. And it just continued to get worse and worse. Now, you know, physically, I recovered, and I was able to compete that year in track. And then that summer, I ended up having to have surgery again on my knee to have the screws taken out. But the next year in soccer, I mean, I was faster than ever, and I was thinking, okay, this is going to be a great year. And then again in basketball that year, I injured myself. And so, I mean, after that, it was pretty much, I didn't necessarily care about the outcome. And so I took a scholarship to play soccer and to run track at a local college, but I only made it halfway through the soccer season, and then I got in trouble with a kid on the soccer team for going inside an apartment when we'd been drinking, and I got kicked off the soccer team, and I got asked not to come out for the track team. And so that was pretty much, you know, it. And from that point, you know, forward, it was more about just drinking and doing drugs and having fun and not worrying about any of the consequences.
So after the injury with the basketball play, you've given up mentally, right? So it sounds a bit like that.
Yeah, pretty much. And, you know, always with the belief that, well, there'll always be time, you know, in the future to get back to playing sports. You know, when you're 18, it's like, well, I'm only 18. I'm having fun, you know, partying right now. I'll just continue to party for a year or so, and then I'll get back into school next year. But, you know, pretty soon you're 20, and then you're 21, and at a certain point, it's like, okay, well, I've already passed that opportunity, and there's really not anything else that I want to do. And so you just get stuck in disappointment, and it's easier just to continue what you were doing than to make the, you know, the changes that need to be made in order to change.
And at which point turned alcohol into drugs? So because that's yeah, for me, it's a big step.
Yeah. So it was alcohol for a year and a half or so, and then, marijuana, and then acid, and then it was ecstasy at the club, and then it was acid and ecstasy at the club, and then it was selling, acid and ecstasy at the club, and then pretty soon it was doing meth the first time, and then, in the last, 6 or 7 years of it, it was pretty much just doing meth. And at the end, it was doing meth and selling meth and manufacturing meth. I mean, it was pretty much, that was the lifestyle that I had chosen.
Well, and so with this, with production and selling, so police kept you, or how did that happen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, eventually, when you're doing what you're not supposed to be doing, I mean, you're going to get in trouble. And there was plenty of times in that, 8 to 10 years that I had gone to jail for 30 days here, 60 days here. But it wasn't until the end, where I'd been pretty much on the run from the police for 3 years. I had warrants in different counties, and I was just going from place to place to place. And eventually I was at a house that got raided by the police, and I actually ran and got away. But instead of leaving town like I would have done in the past, I just stayed there. And a couple weeks later, I was asleep on a bed, and I heard the police in the other room. And I mean, in the past, I would have just gotten up and jumped out the window and run and been gone. But for whatever reason, I just sat there and stood up. And when they came in, I just turned around and let them handcuff me, and that was that. And for about a 30-second moment there, I had the realization that that was going to be the last time that I was going to have to get arrested. But then you get thrown into jail, and the people that are in jail are the same people you've been hanging out with basically. They're just the ones that are, incarcerated at the time. So it really took me about 3 or 4 months to finally make the choice to do things differently. And I'd always known deep down that wasn't going to be my life forever. But until I was willing to not pick and choose what I wanted to do, it was difficult to change. Because I in the past, I would say, okay, well, I'm not going to use meth, but I still want to go to the clubs or go to a rave and do ecstasy and acid or whatever. But it wasn't very long until I was back to doing meth. So until I was willing to stop everything, it wasn't going to work. So, but once I decided that I wasn't going to do anything, it was that much easier to change.
Yeah, I can believe. Had there been any mindset or ritual which helped you to survive the time in prison? How did you use it? So it's not just curiosity of me. So quite open. A person I planned to establish business with just got convicted a couple of weeks ago to 2.5 years of jail because of tax fraud. And
most people will go to jail and then decide that they're going to change when they get out, right? Partly because it's easier to just continue in the same way of thinking while you're in jail, because everybody else, that's their way of thinking. But I mean, I use the experience of being in jail to separate myself from everything, that all the pressures of the environment on the outside. And I started to make the choices that I needed to make in there, so that when I got out, that I was able to make better choices. So, I mean, I used the experience as a way to change my life for the better, instead of waiting until I got out to decide to change.
Have you had any special beliefs or any special things which kept you staying up or fighting for the better?
I mean, not necessarily any special beliefs. I mean, I've always had a spiritual, connection, even throughout my addiction. I mean, I always had that feeling of it wasn't gonna last forever, but it was more of like reestablishing that connection and getting back to doing what the things that I knew that I needed to do, instead of just picking and choosing the things that I wanted to do.
And how did it happen after you got released? You started helping young people, help them to stay away from drugs. So how did this go, and how did you come to this point?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had come up with the idea of a nonprofit while I was actually still incarcerated, and I'd always wanted to do some sort of a cross country trip to promote it. But it wasn't really until 5 or 6 years later that I really started doing something, because when I got sentenced to 54 months in 2 different counties, and I ended up serving just under 24, because I got into a boot camp program where if I completed the program, I reduced my sentence. But when I got released, I was on a transitional leave period. So there was a 90-day period where if I did anything to violate my release, I would have gotten back and had to do the remainder of the 36 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed to be employed right away and, go to like 5 meetings a week. And it was pretty strict. And then I got, pretty wrapped up in just living. I was fortunate that I got a job at a finance company that my dad was doing mortgages with, and I couldn't do mortgages because of my background, but I was able to do leasing of trucks and trailers and heavy equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked my way up from a salesperson to actually managing the leasing division, and then I was managing the whole company, and then I actually ended up purchasing the company in 2005. But I had gotten married in 2005 as well, and when my daughter was born in 2006, I kind of reevaluated my life again, and I was like, well, I'm really not doing any of the things that I had committed to doing when I changed my life. And so that's when I decided that I was going to write a book. I was going to go on a 12,000-mile bicycle ride around the United States to promote the book and a nonprofit that I had started. And I just kind of shut the finance business down and just kind of went for it.
Wow. And so these 12,000-mile race was really based on the idea to have a travel all across the country, right?
Yeah, and the 12,000-mile ride was different than the world record attempt I was going to do. I never ended up doing the world record attempt ride because I ended up getting hit on my bicycle by a car and having to have both my knees operated on again. But my experience with the first ride is fairly similar to other experiences in my life where I think everything is going to work out great, and it doesn't tend to turn out the way that I had planned it to. And after that ride, I was at another point of having to rediscover, myself and what I wanted to do moving forward. And I ended up, after the trip, I ended up breaking 3 ribs and kind of went through another period of depression. And it wasn't until 2010 or 2011 that I finally started pulling out of that, and I was going to do this world record bicycle ride. And then I got hit on my bicycle and ended up having to have both my knees operated on again. And so that was another, big moment. And then
how
Yeah.
far have you been at this point already? So after how many miles did it happen?
Well, that just happened when I was training to get ready to go.
Ah,
So
okay.
yeah.
And so it's
But
a long training you need for that, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, I was going to train for about 6 months before I did it. But before I did the 12,000 miles, I only trained for about 3 months, and then I just started. So
Wow. So that's really hard. And did you change anything on your side? How to take things happen? Don't take it that seriously, or do another program like, hey, take it as a chance to reinvent yourself, or what did you change? Because you mentioned, hey, it happened again and again, and you started things really great,
yeah,
huge expectations, and then something happened.
yeah. I mean, it you know it's been difficult. It probably hasn't been until the last couple of years that I've really been able to look at everything that has happened and really, understand maybe the why. Because, after the getting hit on my bicycle and having both of my knees operated on, I mean, things continued to regress from there to the point to where I had a back surgery at the beginning of 2015 for herniated disc, and then 3 weeks later herniated the same disc to where I was going to have a second back surgery. And then I found out that I needed to have both my hips operated on because I had torn labrums and bilateral impingements. And I was going through a divorce, and that was where, in a moment of, no other options, I was able to instantly heal myself.
Did you know about the surgery step by step, or did you got all the information at once from the doctor? So at
No,
once.
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, that was kind of like a 2 or 3 year period where, things just didn't seem to get any better. I mean, I've had 7 right knee surgeries, 2 left knee surgeries, 2 broken ankles, a torn quad, 2 torn hamstrings. I mean, I've had a bunch of injuries. Now, up until a certain point, I mean, my belief was that it was because of sports or because I played too hard or, whatever it was. Um, I mean, looking back now, I would probably say that the first knee injury was really the only one that was legitimate injury. The others were just because I never fully healed from the first one, and not necessarily physically, but emotionally or spiritually, or whatever you want to call it, the energy portion of that. And so let's say that if I emotionally didn't get over the first injury and there was an imbalance, I just opened myself up for more knee injuries. And then, over time, more knee injuries, and then ankle, quad, hamstring, whatever it was. So I started to
So from your
explore.
sorry,
I was
excuse
just
me.
going to say, I started to explore different possibilities. But it really wasn't until that moment in 2015 where I felt like I didn't have any other options, that I was able to heal myself. Because at that time, the time frame that I was willing to accept no longer worked. So up until that point, if I had a doctor's appointment in a month, I could somehow manage the pain. But the back doctor wanted me to have my hips operated on first. The hip doctor wanted me to do my back first, and then spend 6 months to a year getting in shape so that he could do both of my hips. And to me, that didn't seem like an option that I was willing to do. So in that moment of no other options, I was able to take all the all the pain, and I went out of town, and when I left, I was unable to walk upright, and I went out of town and went on a hike, by a river. I took all the pain and I put it in a rock. I threw the rock in the river, and that was it. I mean, I left not being able to walk upright. I came back and I paddle boarded across the Columbia River and back, which is, a quarter mile across, quarter mile back. But like nothing had ever happened.
Yeah. What did you change in your set of beliefs before this happened? So if I understood you right, you said, well, you due to your thoughts and the incompleted healing mentally, you brought this back and back again into your life again and again. And what did you change? And can you describe that? So from the thoughts perspective.
So I had already started to understand the energy or the emotional components to things. And I even started to experiment with frequencies and vibrations to promote healing and athletic performance. And I was already working with some athletes where I saw that with certain frequencies, their performance would increase 30%. And I was already to the point to where I was able to, instead of, making a patch with frequencies or a bracelet that was programmed with frequencies, I could actually hold it in my hand and just focus my intention on them, and they would still increase their performance as if they had the patch or the bracelet on.
Was it a kind of, sorry, excuse me, was it a kind of binaural beats, or with headsets on and these kind of frequencies, or?
Well, it's similar, but I mean, it's all, everything is frequency and vibration. So a healthy, body is going to have a certain, harmonics of frequency, but somebody with, let's say, a knee injury is going to be missing certain frequencies, or somebody with a digestion issue might be missing certain frequencies. So I had already started to understand possibilities, but I had also never limited myself of what I thought was possible. So, part of the bicycle trip was, I always thought that I could ride 125 to 150 miles a day every day, right? And even through my addiction, there was things that I was able to do on drugs that I knew it was still my body doing it. So the drugs were just a tool that allowed it to become easier. So I already grasped that anything was possible. But the biggest shift came when I finally realized that I could put all my pain in the rock and throw the rock into the river. Now, looking back, I would say that I didn't put the pain into the rock, but the rock at least allowed me to let go of all the pain without me thinking that it was going to go to somebody else. Because part of the reason that I continued to have injuries is because at a certain point, I decided to take on everybody else's pain. So being highly empathic, right? I already felt like my life was over, so I might as well take everybody else's pain and allow them to have a decent life. So it wasn't until I was able to just let it all go that I was then instantly able to heal myself.
If you would give me kind of manual how to do that, how would you describe it into 10 sentences?
And I'm not even sure that I can describe that moment as well as I could describe other moments now where I'm able to focus my intention on other people and they're able to heal themselves. Because in that moment when I healed myself, there wasn't a ton of build up to it happening, right? It was just that I was just going to do it.
Yeah, okay. So just you've been so screwed up that you said, well, I need to get rid of it. So with every single cell of your body.
Yeah. And the reason I went out of town and put it in a rock is because I didn't want the pain to go to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Because part of it is I spent years taking everybody else's pain. I didn't want then just to let it all go and it go back to people or birds or trees or wherever, pain goes, right? So it was just a matter of, once I was comfortable thinking that the pain would go into the rock, because I'd already experimented using rocks and programming rocks for certain frequencies and testing them with people to see if they would get the same results from a rock as they would a bracelet or a patch. So I knew that rocks could hold energy. So it wasn't that far of a stretch for me to put all the pain in the rock and then just throw the rock in the river. Now, looking back, I would say that the pain didn't go into the rock. The rock was just what allowed me to let go of it, because now I think that the pain is already all contained. We just choose to relate with it as it flows through us.
Looking back, there have been so many crossroads and unlucky things happened. Which event in your life made the biggest impact on the Michael you're today?
Well, it's hard to look back and just and pick one, because everything that has happened up until this point has happened because it needed to happen in order for me to be who I am today. The only reason I spent 10 years addicted to drugs and alcohol is because the choices that I was making up until that point led me down that path. Had I been making better choices, then I wouldn't have made the choice to start drinking. So, everything that has happened is all part of where I am today. But I think that it has all happened in order for me to be to a place to where I'm able to help the most amount of people. So, even today when I help other people heal, the only reason that I'm able to help others is because, one, I know what is possible because I've seen it for myself, but also, two, I'm able to have enough compassion and understanding for people that I'm able to hold that space so that they can heal. But had I not experienced all the things that I've experienced in my life, I might not have the compassion needed to help others.
So I love you. I love your approach with the train the trainer concept for healing, and just outline with a couple of sentences this idea for everybody who's hearing this. So I think it's a great idea, and I'm absolutely excited by this. So maybe you can explain it quickly.
Well, I've always believed that healing is possible because it's possible. So since I was able to teach myself to get to that moment where healing was instant, I think other people are able to learn how to get to that point. I don't think that healing is specific to any one person. I think that we're all capable of doing it. So it's just a matter of building enough belief in any moment in time to where that transition between believing and knowing takes place. And I think that there's a lot of different ways to get there, but it's fairly simple what happens in that specific moment in time where that healing takes place.
Sorry. And so as one of the last questions I'm having, so what what kind of recommendation would you give the Michael who's still on the high school, starting to be excited with sports, having the first successes? What would you give him in a conversation if you could?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I would tell that Michael anything different, because that Michael needed to experience everything that he experienced in order to get to where he is today. Now, that being said, I wouldn't want my children to necessarily have to learn those types of lessons, but usually the things that happen in our life are because they need to happen in order for us to learn the lessons that we need to learn. But I wouldn't go back and change anything, because I needed all that to be where I am today.
And if you look forward for the next 3 to 5 years, where would you like to be? So as a last question, with on one hand side personally, and with your Heal the Healer concept and your podcast you're going to start.
Yeah. I think that they're kind of, intertwined, but I would like to be, in a position to where I can help, hundreds of people or thousands of people, but not necessarily help them do anything other than empower them to know that they already have what they need in order to change their life, to heal themselves. I picture, a group of, 100 or 200 people that are on the same, have the same beliefs, and maybe even able to focus all their intention on other people, so that, more people can start to heal.
Yeah, that's a great approach. I like it very much. And so I wish you all the best on this journey, and I'm sure our ways will cross again, and I'm happy to follow your journey, because that's something which, so from all the stories I heard in the last weeks and months, it's one of the one who touches me most. And it was a pleasure really to have this conversation and get a chance interviewing you in this way. So thank you very much.
Awesome, you did a good job.
So thank you very much, and so have a great afternoon on your side. So on my side, it's late in the evening already, and all the best for the future, and take care. Bye bye.